Okay, so I'll try to make this quick too, because I know that everyone is really tired. My name is Mia, like I said before. I am a recent graduate of a master's program in bioethics at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, very close to here. I'm really interested, I said this before, in medical anthropology and traditional medicine and alternative medicine, and really as these topics relate to issues in bioethics. I first want to say thank you, Dr. Mesa, for inviting me to present today. I'm very happy to be here, and I've enjoyed everyone's presentation so much. What I've chosen to present today are some ideas I've drawn from a paper that I wrote in my first semester of the master's program called A Turn Towards the Individual, What Ayurveda Can Offer Bioethics. I do want to note I'm at the very beginning of what I hope to be a career in academics, and I've only just really began thinking about these things, so I really hope that I can study it in greater depth in the future. Basically, in my studies, I noticed this recurring theme in critiques of Western bioethics that through the field's focus on principles and rules and methodology, there's emerged this possibility to overlook the lived experience of the patient. I remember really vividly in an article written by Warren Reich and Dr. Roberto Del Oro called The Search for Meaning and Moral Experience. They talk about how in this modern system, physicians hear the signs and the symptoms contributing to an individual's illness, but they don't really listen to the patient's actual experience of illness, and thus something really integral to the healing process is lost. And in the research that I've done, there seem to be a number of reasons why bioethics might exist in this state today. Reich and Del Oro's article also discuss a number of these reasons. It seems to me like a really big factor is due to this need for a consistent ethical basis in the sphere of public policy. In this modern era, there emerged a really great deal of violence and religious division and violence surrounding religion and surrounding religious modes of thought. So while religion might have initially served to imbue the field of ethics with a sense of meaning, in the new sort of more violent political climate, the primary objectives of ethics shifted towards attainment of consensus, of secular consensus, rather than attainment of meaning. Also, some other critiques I noted, I remember Edmund Pellegrino and David Tomasma's book, For the Patient's Good, The Restoration of Beneficence in Healthcare. They discussed some critiques they had about the autonomy model from many bioethical perspectives. As I'm sure many of you know, medical paternalism often will unjustifiably overlook the wishes of the patient. So it's really important for patients to have all the information available regarding their medical situation so that they can make a fully informed choice about their treatment. And medical paternalism, which for those of you who don't know, I'm sure that all of you probably know what this is. It occurs when a physician overrides the wishes of the patient in order to act in a way that they think will be in the best interest of the health of the patient. But on the other side of medical paternalism, and this is really what Pellegrino and Tomasma dissect in their book, is how turning towards patient autonomy can sometimes really abandon the patient in a time when they're in a very vulnerable state. So in some cases, it may not be the best solution. And I think that Ayurveda does offer some interesting perspectives on patient autonomy and medical paternalism. And I'm going to transition to that now and try to relate all of this back to Ayurvedic medicine. For those of you who don't know very much about Ayurvedic medicine, it seems like some of you do actually, but for those of you who don't know, it began in 1500 BC, and it's one of the first medical systems to advocate for an integrative approach to health and disease, and it's also one of the first medical systems to evolve from a philosophical system rather than from empirical study. So a lot of elements of Ayurveda are really heavily tied to Indian philosophy and Indian cosmology. And I think this becomes really evident once you start to learn more about Ayurveda and Ayurvedic medicine. In the Ayurvedic tradition, health is defined as the physical, psychological, philosophical, and spiritual well-being of the individual. I really think that this definition just in itself provides a great overview of what Ayurveda is all about, because the definition of health encompasses the psychological and the spiritual needs of the individual. The Ayurvedic physician must take into account any element of the patient's life that may disrupt their spiritual well-being. So this might include aspects of their personal life or their social life. In Ayurvedic cosmology, the universe is composed of 5 elements: water, air, ether, earth, and fire. And the human body can be seen as this living microcosm of the larger universe. And ultimately, the goal of Ayurveda is to enable each individual to bring their body into perfect harmony with the universe and with those 5 elements that I just mentioned. And each of the elements manifest in the body through different forms known as doshas. And there are 3 different doshas. One is called vata, and this is the combination of ether and air elements. The second constitution is called pitta, which is the combination of fire and water elements. And lastly is kapha, which is a combination of earth and water elements. So the idea is that from birth, each individual is composed of a unique combination of these 3 dosha, and an individual's particular constitution will determine their affinity or aversion towards different medical treatments, different diet plans or exercise regimens, etc. For example, an individual whose constitution might be very kapha dominant, which is the earth and water dosha, because of their sort of earthy groundedness, they might be more prone to congestion and stagnation and have this sort of heavy, slow quality about them. And in order to mitigate that imbalance, an Ayurvedic practitioner might advise that individual to avoid napping or to exercise more, and in order to instigate the movement of the lighter, more airy vata constitution. So in Ayurveda, the individual's constitution really determines everything. And because every individual's constitution is unique, what may be beneficial to the health of one individual may be toxic to the health of another. So it's really imperative in that sense to focus on what's appropriate for the particular individual and to not apply that information to the treatment of other patients. So in terms of the perspectives in Western bioethics that I mentioned earlier, rather than beginning with this objective set of rules and principles and applying that to the situation of the patient, in the Ayurvedic model, physicians use their specific constitution in order to determine the methodology that should follow. So in this way, the physician is really forced to regard the patient and their health as unique entities, and that should be treated on a singular basis. And it also seems to me like the meaning that I discussed earlier that might be lost in the secular Western healing system would naturally emerge in the system, because in order to treat the patient, the physician must become familiar with their spiritual and their emotional needs as well. So while these needs may still be secular, that sort of supportive and symbiotic relationship that's established between the physician and the patient may act as a source of meaning for the patient and the physician. And second, in terms of the Pellegrino and Tomasma's analysis of paternalism and autonomy, instances of medical paternalism would be far less likely to occur, and autonomy is almost automatically assumed in this medical system because the patient's treatment is so largely determined by their personal account of their exercise habits, their diet, their willingness to even change those habits, and the way that they're communicating the burden of their symptoms to their physician. So in concluding some of these thoughts, I do want to note that so many of these aspects of Ayurveda that I mentioned today, especially the patient-centered components, are not only unique to Ayurveda. A lot of them are a part of different medical and alternative and personalized medical practices. And I want to note that a lot of this model is not really always applicable in the Western medical scenario, just because the physician has a specific medical training and is usually in a situation where they must explain to the patient what their situation is and what the treatment plans are, because the patient simply doesn't know, because they don't have that same medical training. But what I see here and what I want to communicate in this presentation is really an opportunity to benefit from an integration of these two perspectives. And in the model that I see, the same principles of Western bioethics would be applied, but practitioners would just be encouraged to recognize what I think are two very important aspects of Ayurveda. One, that the patient-physician relationship is something not only to be prioritized and to be managed with attention and with patience and with care, but also something that can be an integral component in itself to the healing of the patient. And two, that physicians recognize that every individual patient has a unique history and a unique emotional life and exists within this greater environmental system, all of which undeniably affect their overall health. So that's all I've prepared. I tried to be a little bit fast so that we can
So do you use Ayurvedic medicine yourself?
I do.
Where did your interest come from?
My interest in all of this have come from I have a connective tissue disease, and just like in the past 5 years, it's become more serious. So I have like so many different doctors, and I think the nature of all, like most autoimmune diseases, it's like such a whole body thing, you know, like managing stress and managing diet. So I've really sought after types of complementary medicine that address those things, and Ayurveda is one of those. So I find it really beneficial, along with my Western medical doctors. So there's no other questions.
I'm sure there's other questions, but and so in the future, what do you want to write more about it? This was a part of a paper.
Yeah, this is part of a paper. What I'd like to do is go into more of I'm applying to doctoral program in like health psychology and health behavior research, and to study maybe more on the research side of what the actual benefits of medical practices like this would be. So we'll see.
So as you may know, according to the Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR guidelines, and most Ayurvedic products don't need to be tested for safety.
Right.
If it's mentioned in Ayurvedic texts.
Oh, right.
Do you think this is a good thing, or what do you think? Have you had any side effects from?
I think it really depends on what it is. I think that if it's I think it's a controversial topic. I think if it's a diet, if it's like a diet sort of thing, then I don't think it needs to be approved. But with the more sort of like medications, I think that can get a little bit iffy, where I think testing would be really beneficial on both sides, you know.
Preparation of Ayurvedic medicines is extremely highly supervised in India. Like if you go to the south of India, or if you go to any of the Ayurvedic medical factories, they even include mercury in the combination of different things in the preparation of the medicines, but it's very highly supervised. It's a very ancient practice.
Yeah.
And most of the ones that we have here are food-based, which is why they have food-based and flavors they'll use very often. Different types of it.
So if you're, for example, trying to be vegetarian, are there Ayurvedic medicines based on animal products?
Well,
Very destructive. No?
If people are vegetarian, a lot of them have milk in them, but not vegan. Milk is a really commonly used one.
Yeah. Right. And ghee, clarified butter.
Ghee. Yeah.
Or at times it's a mainstay of their meal, you could say. I mean, everyone drinks milk. No.
It's very commonly used.
So, you know, like, my question here is, so, if the allopathic medicine is existing here, especially in America and Europe, right? So still, what we see now is like there are some of the herbal medicine, which is considered medicine there, is being commercialized here, like aloe vera juice, right? That has been there for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And so do you think there's some kind of scientific connection, and then somehow people in the Western world realize and put in practice of commercializing it?
Yeah.
Or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think LA would probably be the heart of that commercialization. I mean, it's such a yoga. I'm sure that, yeah, I mean, I think that some of the more commercialized practices of and like selling those products are probably authentic, but I'm sure that most of them are not. But I know that that happens here all the time, and I would say especially in California.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are so many cases like, in recent past, like the basil leaves is considered very holy, and it gives you it is believed that it gives you good health.
Yeah.
And then now we can see that the basil leaf, the basil plant is being sold in the stores. I think it's a new trend, isn't that so?
Yeah.
Or has it been there for a long time? No, I don't think so. Right?
No, I think that it is a new trend.
Yeah, it's a kind of a new trend. So it looks like America and the Western world is accepting Ayurveda in parts, but not as a whole. As a whole, right? Is that so?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that a lot of, and what you see now a lot today are East-West doctors, like medical physicians that are adopting aspects of Ayurveda or of alternative medical practices and incorporating that into a more Western model, which I don't see a problem with, like I think that it's a good way to do, to take the best sides of both things.
Yeah, there's no problem. I mean, the greater mankind, humankind will benefit from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the long term.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.